It is Wednesday, March 1st. I can't believe it's March 1st. And we're reading The Two Franzes by Melvin Jules Bouquet. I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce his name, but I can tell you a little bit about him. Here we go. I have a lot of screen sharing to do today. Oops. This is not the one I wanted. We'll take that. Oh yeah, you see it. Okay. There. So here maybe here's somebody's coming. He teaches at Sarah Lawrence College. He's 70 years old. He was the author of Sandman's Dust, Stories of an Imaginary Childhood While the Messiah Tarries, After, Signs and Wonders, Strange Fires, A Faker's Dozen, authors of Neurotica, Nothing Makes You Free, Scribblers on the Roof. And so, he is he teaches a writing fiction workshop. So I think that that's very interesting. And I also just quickly wanted to share with you. Hey, Lynn, glad you got in. I'm going to unmute you.
I'm on my phone. My iPad wouldn't work. So
all right.
Whatever.
Talking about that.
Right. So here, the two main characters and the two Franzes were real. I don't know if you can see, but this picture of Franz Kafka, he's got those ears that they describe in the book, which I thought was fascinating. And that's not it. This is Franz Grillparzer. Again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name, but so these are real people. And obviously the Jules has made this up. He wasn't there at the time. And let's see here. And this is beautiful Prague. And I was there. Oh, it was a long time ago that I was there, but it hasn't, it's still the old city. And I thought that those parts of the story were very interesting. And while we're doing the screen sharing, I have to stop here for 1 second. I did want you to see here, share sound. I did want you to see, so we got this. I wanted you to see, this is the clock that he stared at 100 times.
Oh, yeah.
The astronomical clock, which is part of the Old Town Hall, was originally...
Let's go. Skip. I mean, it is amazing, this clock. Yeah, and there's the apostle.
The apostles going by the window.
So let's see, when was this from? Well, in 2023, we can still appreciate, it was, so many, however many thousands of years ago, and what this kid saw at the time of Franz Kafka. Did you like the story?
Loved it.
It was cute. It was cute. And I didn't know that Franz Grillparzer was a real person. Did anybody know that?
No.
I had to Google it, and which is fine, which is absolutely fine. And he lived from January 1791 to, well, maybe it's another one. Well, he really is a Mediterranean writer. Yeah, it says that he died in 1872. I thought that this happened a little bit, maybe a little bit later because of Kafka's life. So tell me what you liked about the story, and then I have a couple discussion questions. Beverly.
No, I really liked the early descriptions of what would turn out to be his famous stories.
Right.
I got such a kick out of it.
I enjoyed that too. But you have to know a little bit about literature.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't think it would have been as cute.
Right.
No, it wouldn't mean anything.
Yeah, I guess. So, what else did you like about it?
I don't know.
Izzy.
No, I don't mean to sound whatever, but I had read the trial. And when I was reading this, I thought, oh my gosh, this sounds so much like it. And I read this trial like years and years and years ago, and yet I remembered it. And it was just like this, just nothing made any sense. The guy was arrested. He had no idea why. They had no idea why they arrested him. This was back and forth and back and forth. And it was just funny that the kid was so smart, smarter than the guy, and the guy's scribbling down everything he says. And she understands it at the end. I just thought it was very clever. I loved it.
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense, but it was.
Oh my God.
I mean, Lynn.
I thought it was clever, but I thought it had a lot of meaning to this. Again, the first paragraph, I think, gives away, in essence, what I thought was the central theme of the story. And it starts with the word pilfering. And the boy comes, who's pilfering? I mean, both sides are pilfering.
Yeah.
But the emphasis on class division and class disparity and who's smart and what kind of smart are we talking about here? And the fact that this boy is so much more grounded in his 12 years than, I mean, he has ambitions and he has dreams of what he would like to be, but I think the indictment of the upper classes in this, particularly through the description of the castle. And when we were in Prague, that castle takes dominance over that whole city. So I thought the division of classes here and the idea of morals and the idea of what they do for amusement between the two, and the seriousness of this boy's life and his survival, the clash between those two, I think had great importance. I thought the story was wonderful in terms of themes that it brought.
Lynn, that was great. That was really wonderful.
Agreed. And I pilfering, I totally missed that.
That was good. That was
You
great.
gotta pay attention to that first paragraph. Okay, Alice and then Elaine.
Yeah, okay. So I think I read some Kafka, maybe when I was in college, but not a lot. I didn't remember. So right before class, I did a quick Google of Franz Kafka. Well, it went on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
First of all, this story, you all have to Google it and read the Wikipedia. This story brings out so much of his real life.
Right.
He was one of, he had
Six.
he is one of six. Yeah. And his parents had a retail shop, not linens, that it was like, I think, clothes. But parents both worked day and night, and he was left to his own devices, basically. I mean, there were governesses and stuff like that. And so it was very similar to this child, who kind of, roamed around Prague and learned stuff. The other thing that really came out, Kafka never married. He had one affair after another. He went to brothels regularly. He was engaged a few times. He had a lot of sexual hangups, and but he probably was introduced to all of this, the real Kafka, as a child. I mean, think about it. He was 12 years old and he was bringing these notes between these people that were having an affair. there's so much, I mean, besides Izzy, what you said about, references to, the trial and metamorphosis. One other thing I just want to say is, again, the other thing is that he left the real Kafka left his writings to one of his best friends, Max Brod, that he went to law school with, and told him, destroy everything.
Right.
So it's the same thing with this Grillparzer, leaving it to, Franz Kafka. So there's seriously, I want you all to read. It was so interesting for me to read this. One other thing I just want to say that came out with Wikipedia. I never really, I don't think read so much about Kafka, read his stuff, but think about his influence on so many writers and artists. We all talk about things being Kafkaesque, and I think everybody kind of knows what that means. Also,
Everyone knows Metamorphosis and the Bug. Everyone.
It showed in this Wikipedia article all the artists that use Kafka as inspiration. 2 TV shows, Northern Exposure and Breaking Bad, both had episodes that came from Kafka. So I'm just saying it's pervasive. It's just pervasive in our culture. So that's all. That's my thing.
I have Elaine, Evie, and Sue. Go.
Okay, well, fast forward to today's world and think about the difference in what the wealthy class has going for them and the lower middle class. This boy never ever got his real chance to advance. He became whatever, a little office worker and stuff, and he was brilliant. And the Countess and the other Franz were way ahead, and they did not have the smarts that he had. Just think about how nothing has changed really now, and how the privileged class has all the privileges, and that kind of a thing. And it's so hard. A few kids break through, but it's so hard to break through.
Here. Evie, and then Sue.
Well, full disclosure, I've got my homework set out for me because obviously I missed a lot. I don't do well with fantasy type of reading, and I thought I was reading a Harry Potter book and didn't get very far. So listening to everybody is really helpful for me to know what to go back and read. So please keep describing.
Sue, and then Lynn.
Okay, one of the things that I thought that kept coming up was his short pants. And to exaggerate the point that this is a kid still wearing short pants, but he's so smart.
Right.
And I think that the constant, mentioning of his pants was to exaggerate to us how smart this young person really was compared to the older people that he was associating with.
Yes.
Agreed. Lynn.
Well, I think the marzipan bunnies take a focal point in the story. And if you think about it, compare the marzipan bunnies to the interior of the castle and the ornateness and the emphasis on material splendor, which was so beautifully described in the story. Those marzipan bunnies were satiated him. I mean, he just couldn't get enough of them, which is such a contrast to the lifestyle of this upper class. And I thought the use of those bunnies was brilliant.
Agreed. I do have to, Izzy said that the young Franz knew more than the older Franz and the Countess as they were having, trying to have an assignation or whatever. And, talking about 2023, Lital, my daughter, works in a middle school and she's a counselor. And someone got sent to her office yesterday because he called the teacher a porn star. To which I said, well, it's a compliment. Oh, it was the assistant principal. And then we had a discussion. I was with my mom. You know, my mom goes, he didn't know what that meant. Yes,
he did.
He knew what that meant. He probably has seen it. And I said, you know, and obviously it's not the first time she's seen this kid, and she knows the mother, and the mother, she said, deflects. But you know, we forget, whether it be 2023 or young Franz Kafka, these kids are like sponges. And they, you know, especially, you know, Franz Kafka obviously was brilliant. And Alice, your comment of how people have heard the word, I'm going to have to go home now and ask, you know, I'll ask my husband, but also my kids. Have you? And you know, I'm going to bet my son-in-law has read Kafka, and I think they're still reading it in college. And obviously, this Jules is still teaching in college. So maybe people do know about it, but it certainly resonated for this group here because we all knew him and we'd heard of Metamorphosis in the Bug. Full transparency, I've read about it, and I've read about the Jewish part because he was really kind of thrown out of the community for his heretical views. And that was still during the time where when you were thrown out of the Jewish community, you know, there weren't a lot of, you know, nobody would take you in. And the one thing that I marked is that when he was stealing, when he was the little kid is stealing the marzipan bunnies, and the shopkeeper calls him a derogatory name, a yid. And I kept thinking, would that happen today? Would you, you know, use some other? Yes. Yes, says Elaine.
Yes.
All right. Izzy.
No, I just had a question. On page 256, you know, it was all, you know, kind of farce, but Lynn, that was great. I mean, all those observations were really good, but I want to know if she went to bed, she took him to bed because she said one Franz is good as another. That was at the top of, I mean, did anybody else?
Yes.
Pardon? Yeah, it was, let me see.
Breathe.
It was at the top of, oh, I just had it here.
258.
258. She said, I'm, oh, no, where it is. She said, oh yeah, she said before she drew him in, the son of a shopkeeper noticed the quality of the linens. But at the bottom, she said she opened the door of the castle and he entered. Together they walked. Inside was a bed bathed in the glow of a single candle. Before she drew him down, the son of a shopkeeper noticed the quality of the linens.
Yes.
So I thought that was hysterical, but maybe the author really knew about, you know, his sex life, and that he had sex when he was 12 years old with this much older woman in this castle. I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting part.
Well, that would certainly, you know,
the groundwork for his.
I don't know how Jules could know that, you know, for his sexual activities.
In his,
we have Alice, Lynn, and Elaine.
Two things, you know, in Prague, there is that statue to Franz Kafka. And also the other thing, you know, you were saying he was thrown out of the Jewish community, but his three sisters all perished in the Holocaust.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Elaine, Lynn.
Oh, it's me?
Yeah.
There are a couple of questions I had, but throughout this story, we can't excuse, or I guess we can contemplate how this boy gets mixed up in all of this to begin with. And he needs money. He needs money. But throughout, he is really taken in by the glitter of this wealth. I mean, his life has been sheets and towels and you know, that the mercantile class. And he, throughout, there is a contemplation by him, subtly, I think, of moral rectitude, of what is right and what is not. Because the elder Franz says, you know, we have to have a contract, or we have to solidify this with money, because only through money can you gain clarity. And I think the story is to show that that's not true. Through money, you not necessarily gain. And I'm trying to find the part where he talks about, I have to know your integrity and your purpose and your honesty. So we have to do this through money. Well, I'm not sure that that's the way you get to loyalty and trust and integrity, is through shaking hands and money. And there are other references to his being bedazzled by all of this splendor until the end of the story, where he realizes what fools these people are. Except Elena has the, I don't know what you call it, but when she hears him talk, she understands that the elder France could not have written these letters. And I thought that she did have some depth to her, not a lot of depth, but she did have. I was just fascinated by the play of class distinction in this story. And Alice, I read that Wikipedia also. I didn't get the feeling through that they were down and out poor. They did own the store, but for some reason he did not feel like he had the opportunity to pursue what he really loved best. Did you get that? Yeah, feeling?
I mean,
the father was very oppressive,
right? And
they had a terrible relationship.
Right. I think that we forget in 2023 that the middle class and the upper class, that it was so wide. Like one pair of pants, and he fell and he had to sew them up himself. I mean, but they were definitely middle class and were not poor. And maybe today we would look at somebody like, you have one pair of pants, you're poor. So, and the father did seem super oppressive. And who mentioned the statue?
Alice did.
Did you mean this one? The head, there's the head.
No, the other one.
This one. This one.
This one. I
This
can't.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's another, there's like, here he is. I mean, there's a ton of statues of him. So,
Vanessa, can I say one other thing?
Yes.
I noted in the story, I went back and read it, how much they used this little boy, and that they wouldn't recognize him. I marked it in the book. And I think as he goes along, he realizes that he is being used. And that kind of feeling did not sit well with him. And I think that is what woke him up out of this reverie of wanting this, of this glitter being everything, because he thought the man remarkable. So the question is, what's so remarkable about this man, except that he's stealing all of his lines,
Yeah. Beverly, you had your hand up.
Oh, I was trying to find the passage, but it said one of the reasons that these merchants could never move up in class was what they did was they kept buying from each other.
Right.
And
So
of course, listen, he said that he didn't go out of the Jewish quarter. I mean, this wasn't a time where, the Jews were mixing freely with the classes. And I'm looking it up. Kafka died when he was 40. That just is like a, wow. Izzy and then Elaine.
I read in Wikipedia too that his works were not, it was years and years later that they thought he really gained his reputation.
Yes.
But I think maybe that's, as you said, I know he died at 40. Maybe that's because people hadn't read it yet, or people hadn't been introduced to it yet. But it's so sad. There's so many people who live their life and like Van Gogh, whatever, and they're not discovered till
Right.
years and years later.
Right.
But if he died young, and there was like newspapers, there weren't things, like printing presses, so that people couldn't really read his stuff until kind of later.
Yeah.
I'm saying it makes sense.
Posthumously. I mean, when I think about how much those works of art go for millions and millions of dollars, and I think of these poor,
Right.
impressionist artists who died starving,
Right.
it kind of blows your mind. Elaine.
Okay, I vaguely remember years ago stories of fathers taking young boys to prostitutes, to women. And that was a fact. I mean, the sexual revolution didn't come until what, the end of the 60s, the 70s? Yeah. I mean, I'm sure my grandchildren availed themselves of their friends. Okay, but years ago, that was.
I'm not going to tell them you said that, Elaine.
Right, thank you. But years ago, that was the myth. I mean, I don't know because I wasn't a young boy, but you have to remember too that when someone has nothing or little, they are impressed by something. Sure. Okay, yeah. And this child was impressed by the marzipan bunnies. He loved them. Okay, and I gathered from the cost they were very inexpensive, but he didn't have the means. And the parents maybe were not dictatorial. They just worked their little hearts out. And parents were not, as Vanessa keeps saying, this is 2023, the parents are all involved in their children. I don't remember grandparents being involved like my husband and I are with our grandchildren, or any of you are. I mean, people work and men work. And if women worked in the shop, they were exhausted by the end of the day. And the kids sort of found themselves. I mean, I don't think the parents were bad people. I just think they were tired people.
Mm-hmm. Although, before I call on Alice and then Lynn, can you imagine a 12-year-old in 2023 being excited about a marzipan bunny?
No, no, but it symbolizes something.
Yes,
right.
Maybe
Absolutely.
it was a video game or something.
Right.
Okay?
Or the special shoes.
You have to move
the gym
on.
shoes.
Oh, the gym.
You have to move it on to what is important today.
Absolutely. Sue Roberts, you're right. All right, Alice and then Lynn.
Yeah, I thought page 275 is a dialogue between Elena and the young Franz. And I think it's so humorous, but it brings out all these things that that Franz Kafka wrote about. The conversations every day, rather like a dream, ma'am. A dream perhaps of insects? How did you know? Or hunger so fierce that you felt like dying in a cage? Why, yes, that too. And what about a judicial proceeding? You're reading my mind, or you're reading mine, she sighed. Life is a dream, he quoted the title the playwright borrowed from Lope de Vega. But sometimes you wake up and suddenly you see the truth that you could never have imagined. Come with me, Franz. I mean, I think it's so wonderful the way he just summarized so much of what Franz Kafka wrote and thought about. I just want to say one more thing. You know, it was very serious story, but there was humor. And the last lines, when he's talking to the lawyer who's, giving him the, talking to him about what the older Franz left him, he says, lesson number 1, sometimes you get cockroaches and sometimes you get bunnies. If you'd like to accompany me, I will treat you to the best bakery in Prague. I think that's a wonderful ending to this story. It's like, yeah,
Yeah, it really was.
sums it up.
Lynn,
As I was rereading the story, I sort of thought of this as a journey, as a epic journey for this little boy. In 249, he says in this grill parser calls Elena a bitch. And it said Franz was shocked, which is the first time we've gotten any kind of reaction negatively to this remarkable man. If that will be all, sir, I have to get home and do some mending. Mending? What are you, a seamstress? The better Franz knew Franz, the harsher his remarks. So as he is going through this journey, he's gaining an education, and he says that later, uses the word education. No, I'm not, sir. Let's see. My pants ripped. If my father finds out that I wound them, he'd kill me. That's the second time you said that. Young Franz shrugged and gazed at the light of the square. Old Franz pursues his inquiry. How would your father perform the execution? Well, maybe he wouldn't really kill me, just punish me horribly. He'd probably make me write down, I will take care of my clothing 500 times or worse. What? Garth Parser's pen was poised and his mouth was salivating as if he were unwrapping a chocolate ganache. He'd write it on me, Franz laughed, noting that he was capable of making a joke, which he said before he didn't know how to joke. Not a very funny one, perhaps, but a start on the road to repartee and literary renown. Take care of your clothing. Take care of your clothing. Take care of your clothing. Down a piece. Young Franz felt something eerie that he couldn't quite grasp in the elderly playwright's repetition. As it was as if the writer were siphoning the ideas from his head. He said, I've got to go home. Yes, same time tomorrow. He was hardly so immersed in his writing that he was already so immersed in his writing that he hardly noticed his what? His gopher, errand boy, secretary, amanuensis, his muse, which, and at this point, I think there is this epiphany he has that he's being used, and that this man isn't so remarkable, and that this is truly an education. And I have a feeling that I didn't read in Wikipedia that Franz Kafka used experiences to his advantage as he wrote all of his stories. I can tell Alice is going to respond to that.
No, because the beginning of the story, it says, it's a quote from Franz Kafka, the four men I consider to be my true blood relations, without comparing myself to them either in power or range: Dostoevsky, Kleist, Flaubert, and Grillparzer. So yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
At the end of the story, do you not think that he realizes all the faults of this man rather than the fact that he was, I don't know. I think he was looking for a father that would, praise him and actually appreciate his talents, which he did, because he stole all of his words.
I had Googled, did Grillparzer plagiarize Kafka? And Franz Kafka singled out four writers as his blood relations: Dostoevsky and Flaubert, who we've heard of, Grillparzer and Kleist. The first two need no introduction, but the third almost certainly does. Franz Grillparzer, who died in 1872, was considered the finest Austrian playwright of his day.
Wow.
So, and again, obviously this is a fictional story, but it's kind of interesting. So, yeah.
Well, notice the last part. He's getting an education in sexual intimacy, though I wouldn't say intimacy, but sexual
Yeah, you can
experience.
say intimacy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I have just one thing to say.
Which of course, it's because it's easily Googleable. We can Google Franz Kafka and his history and, his sexual history. I mean, you can read it all. So I read it through first and then Googled, then read it through again. Elaine.
Okay, what a 12-year-old boy thinks
Oh my
and
God.
does is totally different than what an adult man thinks and does. So I think we're getting a little confused in the beginning of the story and the end of the story.
Mhm.
Okay, I think that everyone probably gained something. I think the child definitely gained insight into the world. And as an adult, he used that. So I think that we're putting adult thoughts into the boy's head. We have to separate almost what we Google and what a 12-year-old thinks. Okay?
Yeah. Agreed.
But-
Agreed.
Can I make a comment about that?
Lynn and then Izzy.
Yeah. Elaine, that you bring up an excellent point, because that happens so many times in teaching literature. When I would teach a book, for instance, a separate piece about this little boy, and the kids would say, well, that doesn't sound like someone that age could have those thoughts. So you have to think about perspective. It's confusing a lot of times, but you have to think about the perspective of the writer of the story and the narrator of the story. Is the narrator of the story more knowledgeable at the end, or is the writer of the story showing the future and what the boy's perspective is? So I think you bring up an excellent point.
Thank you.
Izzy.
Yeah, I just thought the guy who wrote it was brilliant. He wrote in the style of Kafka and got everything in. I just thought it was brilliantly written in that style. I mean, I just was amazed. He got everything. And at the end, the other Franz gave him all the unpublished things that he had and said, burn them instead, which is the same thing that Kafka, wanted to do at the end, which I didn't understand. Kafka wrote and wrote and wrote and threw away 90% of what he wrote. I read, I think it was in Wikipedia. But here at the end, then Gilpauser, whatever his name is, says, throw them away, but you'll do what you want to do, but throw them all away.
I really like Jane Austen, and I have read that her sister had all of her correspondence and burned it. And
must have been a thing then.
It's the same time period. I think the sister didn't want their personal history and family, whatever, to get out. But I think about it all the time, like what was in there and what had, we would be so interested in it today, 2023. And of course, Jane Austen and her sister Cassandra, they probably even then wouldn't want people 100, 150 years later saying, ooh, look at this, look at that. But there's something so compelling about that. And, and will you find, will people uncover old letters, or in Israel, they uncover coins, and what is still left in modern times to uncover either from antiquity or, these long dead authors. Evie and then Alice.
Building on what you just said, I have two contrasting kinds of things. Probably about 2 or 3 years ago, we gave to the Holocaust Museum my father's letters that he wrote from Vienna before he went into Dachau, and actual letters that were sent from Dachau with that information. On the other hand, going back about 20 or 25 years ago, I was doing a class called, or reading a book called The Artist's Way that was very popular at the time. And I did all these morning pages for about a year and a half. And I have them in a sealed envelope. I'm ready to throw them away. I don't want anybody to read the things that I was marinating about and meandering about over and over and over again, and probably still have not resolved. But do I want to throw them in the fire? I don't know. You know, I'm still torn. I pick it up every once in a while. Oh no, do I want to read this? Am I still dealing with this? So in terms of the written word, it can go either way. I think we treasure somebody else's letters, but how much do they want us to read, or do we want people to read, depending where we are or what's going on at the time? I mean, it's personal, and yet you want to share. It's there's such ambivalence to it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Alice and Merle.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I know we've been talking about, 12-year-old learning and observing adults, but I do feel like in literature and in life, there's so many examples of older people learning from younger people. I'm reading a Barbara Kingsolver novel right now, Unsheltered, and there's this mother-daughter relationship, and the mother is learning so much about life from observing her daughter and talking to her daughter, and 30, 35 years apart. But I even think, from younger kids, I always think that there's a lot of wisdom adults can gain by talking to young people as well as observing young people.
Okay. Merle.
As I read the story, I remembered a movie called The Go-Between with Julie Christie and Alan Bates. And the narrator of the story, the movie, is the go-between. And this was a man who was, as a child, was forced to deliver letters between two lovers. And it was a very, very hurtful relationship. In the end, it hurt a lot of people. And the little boy grew up and never married because he was so upset by what he saw during the time he was the messenger delivering the letters. And of course, he was described in this story, he was described as Hermes, the god, the messenger of the gods. But this book had a much more comic approach to it, but really the responsibility of the go-between is huge. And I thought that this boy at least grew up to be okay. We don't know if he was going to get married or not, but he seemed to be okay. But in the movie, The Go-Between, the messenger was very much psychologically damaged by being the messenger. So.
Absolutely. And on page 252, they're going back and forth, and the little Franz hands over the missive. And I believe, and I think this is when the other Hans, the older, stood her up because something happened at the theater. Franz was amazed by the immediate, palpable power of words. The Countess was transformed. She trembled with barely restrained fury and stood so abruptly that a vase of ostrich feathers on her table wobbled. Had the playwright deliberately insulted her? Shall I? Franz hesitated. Shall you what? She snapped. Shall I tell Herr Girlpaz or anything? Yes. Tell him to take this trite claptrap back to the popular stage where it belongs. She tore the offending letter to shreds and dropped them in her wake. Franz followed her out of the restaurant as the maitre d' commented to the bartender, filthy Jew. So again, I don't know if the author is bringing back in the filthy Jew part. If, look, nobody likes to make a scene in a restaurant, and that the same stands in 2023. And I'm sure we've all witnessed it, hopefully not our families, but, people yelling at the way, whatever in restaurants. And when you watch it as an observer, it's very uncomfortable, very, very uncomfortable. So, the maitre d' is trying to, I guess, look at that little Jewish kid. So I think Merle, what you said is, you know, the go-between has a lot of pressure, on it. Lynn.
I think for me, the story was the education of the go-between and what he learns from this. And after he sees all of this petty, stupid going back and forth, and then he introduces this filthy Jew comment, he starts looking at his life in a different way. He comes back home. He needs to there's more pressure for him to get back home and back to the basics of what his life should be like. And at the end on that 253 of that paragraph, nor had Franzes been a night to cherish. He went through alone Prague's twisty maze. To me, that was his brain trying to sort out what he had seen all this time. And he said, actually, it wasn't a bad deal. If only he had enough cash left to take care of his parents, he would have had a happier childhood. Again, we come back to this moral examination of people's habits and behaviors. And I think while he didn't get to what he really wanted to do until, and actually what's mentioned here is what was mentioned in Wikipedia about working in an insurance company. He did get finally to the passion that he wanted. But to me, this was a travel through the morals and values and behaviors of a society that he thought was dazzling and appealing, and finally realizes that that's not for him. That was not the life for him. So I think there was while it was in a lighter vein, I think there's some serious questions that he examined.
And we have to give, kol hakavod, we have to give credit to Jules for looking up this Gil Parza, and that he was a playwright, and that it makes the story, and of course we all wanted to Google to find this, it makes it even more interesting. Elaine.
I don't think that he chose to be an insurance person. I don't think he had the opportunities to go to a top college. He didn't have the money. So, Lynn, I hate to disagree with you. I think that he would have, right, I know that. But I think he probably would have chosen a better life had he had the money to do it. And I
going to college.
I think
And
he had the brains, but there wasn't scholarships then and that kind of thing. So he had no outlet to get higher up on the ladder. He got as far as he could go.
He had no support system in his family.
I think we don't know that. We don't know.
We do know that. If you read,
we don't. His parents were working. Maybe that's all they could do, and we have to, think that people with small minds, maybe the parents, that's all they were little merchants, and that's all they could do. Okay, not everyone has the wherewithal to be great.
Well, if you read the background on him and what he says in the story is that his father and his mother, to an extent, did not think writing was a legitimate profession.
I understand that.
Well, think about us today. Many of us came from middle-class homes. I would say that if it hadn't been for the support and encouragement of my parents to continue, who knows what I would have, who knows?
Right, so we're talking about Prague in the late 1800s. It was a totally different world. And that's all I'm saying. I don't think the opportunities were availed to him. You couldn't just do and be.
Yeah, all right,
That's all I'm
Izzy
saying.
and then Merle.
I was just gonna say, when I read the Wikipedia, he ended up going to law school. In actuality, he was a lawyer, and then he worked for the insurance company as, I think, a lawyer. So he did educate himself after that.
Merle?
Well, in Prague, the castle is supposed to be the most magnificent castle in Europe, bigger than any castle in Europe. So anyone who lives in Prague is going to see that at the top of the hill all the time and compare themselves. But someone asked Tolstoy what was important to you in life, and one of the things he said was little brown roasted potatoes. So I thought it was, what reminded me of that was when Franz gets the 100 Kronen note. What does he goes and buys cookies, you know. What does he do with the money? He just goes back and buys the cookies. So I think that what he really was trying to say here is that some of the simple things in life are the happiest things in life for us, rather than the great wealth or living in that magnificent castle. So I thought the ending was very, wise, and he had learned something.
Right.
This review, this story appeared in A Faker's Dozen. And a review said The Two Franzes, a story about the young Franz Kafka, reads like a discarded skit for an intellectual Saturday Night Live.
Oh,
With 12-year-old Franz playing messenger boy to his first mentor, playwright Franz Grillparzer. Kafka's budding talent is ploddingly noted. He often had ideas that he didn't know what to do with, as is the genesis of Metamorphosis. You little insect, hisses his sister. That's when, when he's the cockroach. Many of the, then it goes on to the other stuff that's in that book. But I thought an intellectual Saturday Night Live was an interesting way to describe this story. And, it's, I liked it. I liked it. I do want to remind everybody that we don't meet again until, put it up here.
April.
Yeah, until April. And one of the reasons why is I have, here we go. I have a conference in 2 weeks, and then then April 5th, I'm making Passover, and it's that night. I can't be doing short stories and
Right.
get ready. And I'm having everyone at my house. But then April 19th, Dedicated to the Dead by Tova Reich. And I think we'll probably end in June. We can have some discussion about that. We can also have some discussion about a multi-access situation where you're at home and some people are here, and we'll take it from there. This weekend is Pormspiel. I hope, come on down, or if you're far away, you can stream it. Sue Roberts.
Thank you.
Welcome. And Lynn, you can stream it. So it'll be a lot of fun. We're going to have savory Homentashen, which everyone is making fun of me, but my prediction is that they'll be eaten up.
I agree.
We have some brisket Homentashen.
Oh, wow.
It sounds delicious.
Yes.
It's a sandwich. It's a
Talk
bird
about
sandwich.
That's the new thing.
It is the new thing. So, and Sunday morning is Roberta Qual, and she's discussing her book. Oh wait, I know where it is. It's at the bottom of my. It's in my signature here. It is Remixed Judaism, Preserving Tradition in a Diverse World. So that's what's coming up. If you need me, you know where to get me. Have a good little break, so it gives you plenty of time to read. The book I'm reading at night is The Matchmaker's Gift, and it's not a literary classic, but it is very fun to read. You're on vacation, Lynn and Sue, so you can. I thought it was it's a cute book, and I recommend it.
Okay, thank you. Have a good time. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
To make this.